Nama Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prestaya Bhutale Shrimati Bhakti Vedanta Swaminiti Namane Namaste Saraswati Deve Gauravani Pacharne Nera Vishesha Shunyavadi Pasti Jade Jatane Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadha Shivasari Gaura Bhaktivinoda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare Vanshkalpatarubhyas cha kripa sindhubhyeva cha patitanam pavanebhyo vaishnavebhyo namo namaha. Jai Srila Prabhupada ki jai. All glories to all the assembled devotees. So devotees, we last night we finished with verse 32. Verse 32. It was all about, that section at least, that section was all about understanding, which is a sort of subdivision of knowledge, really. Understanding in the modes. Yeah, so now we're going on to the subsection from verse 33 to verse 35, which is all about determination in the modes. Or in the language used earlier in the chapter for the five factors, the endeavor, yes. Just got to see where these things connect up, that we're discussing one thing, we're not discussing, a few different things. So determination is what the term which is used, and it's referring to, out of the five factors of action, the factor called endeavor. All right, so let's read verses 33, 34, and 35. 33, O son of Prita, that determination which is unbreakable, which is sustained with steadfastness by yoga practice, and which thus controls the activities of the mind, life, and senses, is determination in the mode of goodness. 34, but that determination by which one holds fast to fruit of results in religion, economic development, and sense gratification is of the nature of passion, O Arjuna. Try and keep the noise down. And 35, and that determination which cannot go beyond dreaming, fearfulness, lamentation, moroseness, and illusion. Such unintelligent determination, O son of Prita, is in the mode of darkness. Sure. Yes, okay. So let us go through these. Verse 33. O son of Prita, that determination which is unbreakable, which is sustained with steadfastness by yoga practice, and which thus controls the activities of the mind, life, and senses, is determination in the mode of goodness. Okay, goodness. Well, it's very nice characteristics. I remember reading this verse years ago, really years ago, in the earlier 70s in Srila Prabhupada's time, and thinking, wow, this determination, this is really something wonderful. So, yeah, look at the qualities, the characteristics of it. Unbreakable determination. Sustained, like maintained with steadfastness in yoga practice, by yoga practice, and which therefore makes the person self-controlled, fully self-controlled. This is determination in the mode of goodness. And this is very relevant. This is very relevant, isn't it, to Krishna consciousness. So Srila Prabhupada makes some interesting comments. Prabhupada says, the word avyabhicharinya is very significant, for it indicates that persons who are engaged in Krishna consciousness are never deviated by any other activity. Avyabhicharinya. You know, the word, it's avyabhichari is sort of the basis. The word is vyabhichari, and means not vyabhichari. And the suffix, the ending, avyabhicharinya, that's a suffix. These things are modifying the meaning of the basic word, which is vyabhichari. And vyabhichari means flickering, unsteady. We've come across this. We've come across this anyway. It has appeared in Bhagavad Gita and other places. It's there in Srimad Bhagavatam also. And it refers to people who are very unsteady. You know, actually, there's an explanation given by Srila Prabhupada, which I've read some time ago, that would you believe, and don't you mind me, please don't mind me talking about it, but a prostitute, a term which is used like she is a vyabhichari. It means she can't focus her mind on one man. There are many men. So she's vyabhichari, very flickering. Here, then there, then at another place, then again, and someone else, and another one, and another one. Yeah, this is vyabhichari. But determination in the mode of goodness and in Krishna consciousness is avyabhicharinya. It's unbreakable, not flickering. Yeah, so that's very nice. And like I said, from the first time I read this many years ago, probably in 1973, actually, when I first read Bhagavad Gita, I thought, yeah, that's good. That's really good. 34, but that determination by which one holds fast to fruitive results in religion, economic development, and sense gratification is of the nature of passion, O Arjuna. So really, you know, in essence, the main point is, and in general, it's just the main point when it comes to the mode of passion anyway, is that a mode of passion in whatever sort of aspect of one's life, it's functioning. Here it's determination. We've read about knowledge in the mode of passion. We've read about various things in the mode of passion, and the basic characteristic, the basic sort of underlying theme which is there, is that it's all revolving around, it's all focused on fruitive results, material results. As Krishna says here, fruitive results in religion, in economic development, in sense gratification. people who are practicing some form of religion, and what they are looking for, what they want, is some material benefit. And beyond that, that's basically all there is to it. They just want some material fruitive result, sense gratification, economic development, as Krishna says, like this. Even Prabhupada, when he first arrived in America, he gave a class in some religious institution. I think it's recorded, but anyway, I've read about it at least. And in that class, Prabhupada talked about prayer. And he said, in Christianity, it was a Christian institution, Prabhupada said that you Christian people, you have a prayer, give us this day our daily bread. But Prabhupada said, what is this? What is this prayer? Religion means to love God. But what is this prayer? This prayer is about love of bread. Give us bread. We want bread. Of course, some people, they try to explain it indirectly. But, in general, we see many people in that religion, they want material things. Similarly, in Islam, they want material things. And we generally, we like to take things as they are. Bhagavad Gita as it is. Not Bhagavad Gita with some sort of twisted attempt at explaining away something which otherwise seems to make sense, just if you look at it in a straightforward way, as it is. Right, yes. So therefore, the people who are in the mode of passion, whatever they do, whatever it is, they're into getting material results, fruitive results, for material enjoyment, material development, etc., like that. And the desire is basically for sense gratification. And Srila Baladev Vidyabhushan makes an interesting little comment. Listen to this. He says, this happens because of their association with others who are experienced in sense gratification through these means. They associate with people who have performed that type of religion, perhaps, or that type of maybe business, if it's economic development. They associate with people who have done those sorts of activities and maybe become successful in business, for example. And then they think, oh, I'll do it too. They're inspired by the association of others who are experienced already in that type of activity, including in religion. Sometimes I've met people who have changed their religion because they were told by their next door neighbor or some friend or relative or somebody who told them that, I converted from whatever it is, some religion to another one, and I got a better job. And I got more money. And now I've got a better car and a better house. And you should get into it too. And then people, they do that. They do that on the basis that maybe we'll get also like this, my friend, like my relative, maybe I'll also get more money. It'll come my way if I pray in this way. Okay. 35. And that determination which cannot go beyond dreaming, fearfulness, lamentation, moroseness, and illusion. Such unintelligent determination, O son of Prita, is in the mode of darkness, mode of ignorance. So yeah, dreaming, fearfulness, lamentation, moroseness, illusion, and they can only enjoy in their dreams, which means they're not enjoying because there's nothing there. They dream of becoming rich and getting a big house, but there's no big house. They don't have a big house. It doesn't exist. It's only in the mind. It's like just a fiction, hallucination. Yes. Srila Prabhupada makes a point here. Prabhupada says, it should not be concluded that a person in the mode of goodness does not dream. They may dream also. I mean, not that they just sort of dreamers, they just dream and dream and dream, but they may also dream. Here, in this context of the mode of ignorance, here, dream means too much sleep. Yes. Prabhupada says, dreaming is always present. Either in the mode of goodness, passion, or ignorance, dreaming is a natural occurrence. Because our minds get exposed to all sorts of different things, different impressions impact themselves on our minds, and they get sort of stored within. And particularly when you're sleeping or when you're relaxing and the mind is not really occupied or focused on doing something, then these things, they may start coming back up to the surface again. So even in a person who is in the mode of goodness or passion, but those who cannot avoid oversleeping, who cannot avoid the pride of enjoying material objects, who are always dreaming of lording it over the material world and whose life, mind, and senses are thus engaged, are considered to have determination in the mode of ignorance. When I was a child, when I was young, really, I was at school and I was a young boy. There was a film by a very famous actor, comedian. His name was Danny Kaye. He was very, very, very prominent, Danny Kaye. And I would go and see his films, from time to time. And he did one film. It was called The Secret Life of Walter Mitty. So there was this man, Walter Mitty, and he was in the mode of ignorance. He would just, at home, he would just sit there and just drift off into a dream world. And I remember one of the dreams, I saw the film at least twice because it was like, I thought I was really impressed. I'm sure I was not more than 10 years old. And I remember one scene, he dreamt he was like the pilot of a fighter airplane. Yeah, the other things I forget. But he would just drift off into these dream worlds. And that was his secret life. Because in these dream worlds, he'd become a hero. He'd become famous. He'd become rich. That was his secret life. Only he knew about it because it was just in the head. But it was just tamagun. So that determination that you can't get up and do it. You can only sit there and think about doing it. This is in the mode of ignorance. All right, so now verse 36, let's have a look. Verse 36, let's just read it. It's kind of a separate verse because it's introducing the next group of things in the modes. So 36, O best of the Bharatas, now please hear from me about the three kinds of happiness by which the conditioned soul enjoys and by which he sometimes comes to the end of all distress. Wow. Three kinds of happiness. Yeah. All right, so this brings us to the next subsection, which is verses 37, 38, and 39. And well, as Arjuna asked, as Krishna said, I'm now going to tell you about three kinds of happiness. Three kinds of happiness. All right, let's see. Well, Prabhupada discusses in the purport, it's nice, it's important, that conditioned souls are trying to get happiness by any means again and again and again and then yet again. And in this way they chew the chewed because it's always the same thing. It's always the same thing. You know, after you've smoked, shall we say, 1,000 cigarettes, and now you're going to have cigarette 1,001. Do you really think it's going to be different? It's just chewing the chewed. But, and this is nice, this is very important, Prabhupada is now applying it in Krishna consciousness. But sometimes in the course of such enjoyment, he becomes relieved from material entanglement by association with a great soul, the association of devotees. In other words, a conditioned soul is always engaged in some type of sense gratification. But when he understands by good association that it is only a repetition of the same thing, and he's awakened to his real Krishna consciousness, then he is, Prabhupada says, please note, he is sometimes relieved from such repetitive so-called happiness. You know, Prabhupada, he's so clever. Yes, so, well, you know, the second half of the purport is already talking about happiness in the mode of goodness. Yeah. Or actually happiness in Krishna consciousness. You know, oftentimes, as we've seen, these two are very closely connected, or at least closely related, like this. Association of devotees has been mentioned from time to time in Bhagavad Gita. Yeah. An interesting little point, which is not really referred to directly in the verse itself, or even the purport, but in the verse, in the third line, the first word is abhyasad ramate, that by practice, abhyasat, by practice, ramate, one enjoys. Yeah, Prabhupada, the way Prabhupada has put it, is that the person comes to the end of all distress. Yeah. but in other words, one enjoys. Having stopped suffering and engaged positively, then one enjoys happiness, at least in the mode of goodness. But as Prabhupada has mentioned here, association with devotees in Krishna consciousness. So it's obviously referring to something spiritual, not simply something just material mode of goodness. Okay, that was verse 36. So now 37 to 39. These are the verses talking about the modes, happiness in the modes. 37, that which in the beginning may be just like poison, but at the end is just like nectar, and which awakens one to self-realization, is said to be happiness in the mode of goodness. 38, that happiness which is derived from contact of the senses with their objects, and which appears like nectar at first, but poison at the end, is said to be of the nature of passion. Well, yes. Krishna. 39. And that happiness which is blind to self-realization, which is delusion from beginning to end, and which arises from sleep, laziness, and illusion, is said to be of the nature of ignorance. You bet. It definitely is. All right. So let's go through these verses. 37. That which in the beginning may be just like poison, but at the end is just like nectar, and which awakens one to self-realization, is said to be happiness in the mode of goodness. Okay, so the basic idea is poison at first, nectar at the end, and it naturally arouses interest in self-realization, or inspires one. One naturally becomes inclined towards self-realization. Yeah, this is happiness in the mode of goodness. What is this poison, though? What is the... normally we don't think of the mode of goodness having poison in it. So what's the idea here? The idea is that for this happiness, you have to follow rules and regulations. You can't just do what you like. You have to act in very specific ways as ordained by Scripture. And, if you're habituated to material life, that will be difficult. Yes, there's just no doubt about that at all. But the idea is that you persevere, you keep going, you keep pushing. And even though the mind may protest and so on and so forth, but you persevere. Yeah, you persevere. And then it becomes nectar. Okay. Just like Krishna says, we read earlier in Bhagavad Gita that if you follow the regulative principles, he calls them, Krishna calls them the regulative principles of freedom. The regulative principles of freedom, not the regulative principles of restriction. The regulative principles of, making you feel uncomfortable and like you don't want to do it, really. So it's like that. So in that sense, the term poison is used. But if one applies oneself very nicely, then quickly one comes to see that what was apparently poison from the very materialistic point of view, it really helps one taste nectar. And therefore, the devotee becomes happy to do some austerity, to get up early, for example, to chant rounds. You just, sit there for an hour or two or something, just repeating the same thing. To most people, they'll think, what are we doing? But if you persevere, you find it's nectar. It's such nectar. It's amazing. All right. So in that way, it's different from the happiness of sense gratification, which is instantaneous. Instantaneous, basically. Yeah. And sometimes quite strong. Okay, so now verse 38, that happiness which is derived from contact of the senses with their objects, and which appears like nectar at first but poison at the end, is said to be of the nature of passion, of course. So it's very sensual. It's all revolving around the senses contacting the objects. Like young man is attracted to young woman and vice versa, and all this sort of thing. And Prabhupada gives that example, that becoming attracted sensually, getting all caught up with each other, but then difficulty comes because you don't really care about each other, you just care about yourself. And when you see the other one doesn't really care about you, they're just trying to use you for their own pleasure, then difficulty arises and divorce happens. Prabhupada concludes the purport by saying, such happiness is always in the mode of passion. Happiness derived from a combination of the senses and the sense objects is always a cause of distress and should be avoided by all means. Whoa, Krishna. Yeah. It's always a cause of distress and should be avoided by all means. In other words, if you're a devotee, don't start thinking that, I've learned how to live in Krishna consciousness. I can sort of handle situations and people. So if I go back to material life, I'll be successful. Previously, I was in material life. I wasn't successful. And I got fried, and I became a devotee. But now I can handle it. So if I go back to material life, I'll be happy. Don't think like that. Should be avoided by all means. Srila Baladev Vijayabhushan says, not only does the experience become one of suffering through divorce, etc., but one will also go to hell for doing those illicit things. So you have to undergo the suffering of the conflicts and, dealing with other people who aren't interested in you. They're just interested in themselves, and they want you to give them pleasure, and they don't care about how you feel. Not only do you have to go through those difficulties, but in the end you go to hell. Oh, Krishna. Because you were engaged in sinful activity. 39. And that happiness which is blind to self-realization, which is delusion from beginning to end, and which arises from sleep, laziness, and illusion, is said to be of the nature of ignorance. Delusion, happiness, which is blind to self-realization, it's delusion, it comes from sleep, laziness, and illusion. Oh my gosh, it's a disaster. So therefore we find tamasic people, they like to sleep. They look forward to sleeping. And they think, oh good, I'm going to be able to sleep soon. This is really tamagun. And of course, well anyway, we read before, They don't know what to do, what not to do. They're spontaneously attracted to doing wrong things. They're always in illusion. There's no happiness in the beginning or the end. And passionate people, at least they get some sort of ephemeral happiness. Yeah. Not so much flickering happiness, but it's something. They get some stimulation. Oh, they feel good briefly. Yeah. And then they suffer. But the person in ignorance is just suffering from beginning to end. All right. So now the conclusion. So this is now basically, essentially, the conclusion of this further discussion about the modes and how they operate in different aspects of our lives. And Krishna gives a conclusion, verse 40. There is no being existing either here or among the demigods in the higher planetary systems, which is freed from these three modes, born of material nature. There's no being existing except the devotees. Except the devotees. And even while the devotees are just practicing and learning how to be devotees, they're not pure devotees, they're not perfect devotees. So, yeah, well, we've been learning about all the different aspects of the modes, how they operate in these very, central points of our lives. What could be more central to our life than our happiness? And all these other things, knowledge, the endeavors we make. So for us, we also have to learn these things so we can see ourselves properly and then understand what to do to improve ourselves and to become devotees or, become advance in Krishna consciousness and become qualified to go back to Godhead. Yeah, so anyway, so the idea is the modes are ruling everything. There's kind of almost nothing but the modes. At least they dominate so much. Nothing living or non-living which is not under the modes. So Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur makes a nice comment. The meaning of this section about the modes, the meaning of this section is that sattvic items are acceptable, and those of rajas and tamas, passion and ignorance, are not. And even ultimately, we must aspire for pure Krishna consciousness, and not simply being in the mode of goodness. Okay, so now there's an interesting section, fourth section, from verse 41 to 48. Worshipping the Lord through one's occupational duty is true renunciation and brings freedom from reactions. Now that's good, isn't it? Let me just read it again. That sounds really good. Worshipping the Lord through one's occupational duty is true renunciation and brings freedom from reactions. And it's verse 41 to 48. So, in terms of revisiting, going back and discussing further, and even in more conclusive ways, certain things which have been discussed before in Bhagavad Gita. This is discussing karma kandya, occupational duty, means basically karma kandya. Or it may mean karma yoga. It's one of the two. Karma kandya, just doing your duties, Brahman, Kshatriya, Vaishya, Sudra, whatever that is, but you do your duty according to your position in those terms. Yeah. And if you do that, that's real renunciation, and you won't get reactions for doing that. In other words, you'll be free. You'll be liberated. Yeah. And we can apply the principles in Krishna consciousness in terms of what sort of things we should try to do for the cultivation of our Krishna consciousness. So let's just have a quick look here now. Okay. Well, yeah, it's just one section. There are no subsections. So let me just read all the verses right through. Brahmins, Kshatriya, so 41. Brahmins, Kshatriyas, Vaishyas, and Sudras are distinguished by the qualities born of their own natures in accordance with the material modes, O chastiser of the enemy. 42. Peacefulness, self-control, austerity, purity, tolerance, honesty, wisdom, knowledge, and religiousness. These are the natural qualities by which the Brahmins work. That's very important for us. When we're giving second initiation, we practically always quote this verse, that when a devotee wants to become second initiated, they must cultivate these qualities. In other words, they're very relevant in Krishna consciousness. 43. Heroism, power, determination, resourcefulness, courage in battle, generosity and leadership are the natural qualities of work for the Kshatriyas. 44. Farming, cow protection, and business are the natural work for the Vaishyas. And for the Sudras, there is labor and service to others. 45. By following his qualities of work, every man can become perfect. Now please hear from me how this can be done. Now this is just the crux of the matter. This is what it all boils down to, as they say. 46. By worship of the Lord, who is the source of all beings and who is all-pervading, a man can attain perfection through performing his own work. 47. It is better to engage in one's own occupation, even though one may perform it imperfectly, than to accept another's occupation and perform it perfectly. Duties prescribed according to one's nature are never affected by sinful reactions. 48. And this is just, I tell you what, this is really important. Every endeavor is covered by some fault, just as fire is covered by smoke. Therefore, one should not give up the work born of his nature, O son of Kunti, even if such work is full of fault. Oh, this is just really important information. All right, so let's go back to, 41. Brahmins, Kshatriyas, Vaishyas, and Sudras are distinguished by the qualities born of their own natures in accordance with the material modes, O chastiser of the enemy. All right. So by doing work which is born of your nature, then one will become fixed, one will become very stable, because one is living in a very natural way. And in this way, knowledge, understanding can arise. Yeah. Baladeva Vijayabhushan, Srila Baladeva Vijayabhushan makes an interesting point. Listen to this. Brahmins are in goodness, Kshatriyas are in passion. But for Kshatriyas, sattva is a secondary mode. There's some element of sattva in a Kshatriya, to some degree. And Vaishyas are predominantly in passion, with tamas as a secondary mode, due to dealing with money all the time, etc. Sudras are predominantly in tamas, with rajas as a secondary mode. That's a subtle understanding. All right, now, an important point here is that for us as devotees, practicing devotees, it's not so much a matter of our material nature and finding some Krishna conscious activity which is natural to us in terms of our material nature. That's not really the point, although, it can help. But really the point is that one is given service by the spiritual master or by the authorities. And one should accept that as one's duty in life and focus on that and not get deviated from that. That is the principle here for us as devotees, performing our prescribed service as given by the spiritual master, as given by the senior devotees, the authorities like that. Okay, 42, peacefulness, self-control, austerity, purity, tolerance, honesty, knowledge, wisdom, and religiousness. These are the natural qualities by which the Brahmins work. Okay. Yes, well, that's pretty straightforward. That's very straightforward, actually. And, frankly, we do actually look for this in the devotees when the possibility of them getting second initiation comes up. We want to see, has the person actually changed? Or is the person actually changing and becoming a better person, a more stable, focused, Krishna conscious person? And if they are, then the possibilities there of getting second initiation. Srila Baladeva Vijayabhushan says, even if these types of actions appear occasionally in a Kshatriya or other Varna with an increase of sattva, these actions are mentioned in relation to the Brahman because of his predominance of sattva. Sometimes the Kshatriyas will manifest some of these, like honesty. Yeah. Some of them, they'll manifest to some degree. But the Brahmins, they're very situated in these qualities. That's sort of like, that's what they are. They're that sort of person. And we have a special question here for those of you doing Bhakti Shastri based on this verse 42. But the question is based on, it's a verse. It's a verse actually from Caitanya Charitamrita, chapter 23, verse 86. Madhya Lila 23:86. Madhya Lila 23:86, which says, similarly, Srimati Radharani has unlimited transcendental qualities, of which 25 are principal. Sri Krishna is controlled by these transcendental qualities of Srimati Radharani. So the question is that we want the verse, what do we want? Oh, no, we don't. We want to know how many principal qualities does Radharani have? principal qualities. She has unlimited, the verse says, she has unlimited transcendental qualities, but of them, 25 are principal. There you go. 43. Heroism, power, determination, resourcefulness, courage in battle, generosity and leadership are the natural qualities of work for the Kshatriyas. Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur says, this verse describes the activities of the Kshatriya in whom Rajagun becomes prominent and Sattva becomes secondary. Baladev Vijabhushan says in regard to the Kshatriya's courage, even if his death is certain, he does not flee or turn his back to the enemy. That's Kshatriya, courage, even if his death is certain. And the Sanskrit says, an interesting little point, from the Sanskrit, third line, it says he has Ishvara Bhava. Ishvara Bhava, which translates as leadership. You know, he's got sort of leadership qualities. But Ishvara Bhava, the term is often used to refer to a devotee who wants to be in charge. He wants to be the president or the head of department or whatever it is. That's Ishvara Bhava, literally means controlling nature. 44. Farming, cow protection and business are the natural work for the Vaishyas, and for the Sudras there's labor and service to others. Okay, so that's very straightforward. Oh, look, we got another special question. Can you believe it? It is from what? A letter on July 16th, 1970 from Los Angeles. July 16th, 1970 from Los Angeles to Nevatyaji. And in the letter, Prabhupada says, cow protection practically solves the problems of sustenance and the greater portion of time of the devotees, being not engaged in the frantic scramble of materialistic competition for food and shelter. So the greater portion of time of the devotees, because they're not engaged frantically in material life, so the greater portion of their time is kept engaged in the pursuit of spiritual perfection. So the question is, we want you to refer to a letter of Prabhupada's, which we mentioned, which talked about cow protection. What did Prabhupada say about it? Read the letter and you'll see. Cow protection practically solves the problems of sustenance. 45. By following his qualities of work, every man can become perfect. Now please hear from me how this can be done. So this is very important, isn't it? Yeah. So, Srila Baladev he makes a few points here, actually. He makes a few points. You know, we note Prabhupada doesn't give any purports to quite a few of these verses here. But Baladev Vijabhushan does, and it's nice, actually. Engaging in the activity prescribed according to one's varna and ashram, the performer attains steadiness in gyan, in knowledge, which manifests from within the activities, like a lotus flower arising from its root in the mud. In other words, if we perform our prescribed duties given by Guru or by the devotees, then from within realization and knowledge will come, simply because we're doing our duty. Means doing the duties we just read in verses 42 to 44. And Baladev Vijabhushan, this is interesting, he says that Arjuna now asks, but how can actions which are said to cause bondage lead to steadiness in knowledge, which is the cause of liberation from bondage? Did you get that? How can actions which are said to cause bondage lead to steadiness in knowledge, which is the cause of liberation from bondage? Haribol, that's a good one, isn't it? So the answer is in verse 46. By worship of the Lord, who is the source of all beings and who's all-pervading, a man can attain perfection through performing his own work. There you got it. We do our duties. Even in terms of karma kandi or karma yoga, they will help us a lot. But particularly for devotees, if we stick at our duties, our service, prescribed service given by guru or by the senior devotees, we will get realization. We will make progress. Ultimately, we'll go back to Godhead through serving very sincerely. Okay. Prabhupada explains in, it looks like the second paragraph of the purport. Yes. Listen now, this is good. Listen to this. Second paragraph of the purport. Everyone should think that he's engaged in a particular type of occupation by Rishikesh, the master of the senses, and by the result of the work in which one is engaged, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Sri Krishna, should be worshipped. If one thinks always in this way in full Krishna consciousness, then by the grace of the Lord he becomes fully aware of everything. That is the perfection of life. Yeah, so there you go. And 47, it is better to engage in one's own occupation, even though one may perform it imperfectly, than to accept another's occupation and perform it perfectly. Duties prescribed according to one's nature are never affected by sinful reactions. Yeah, well, that's true. But duties performed under the direction of the spiritual master or the authorized senior devotees, they're never affected by sinful reactions. Rather, they free one from sinful reactions. So this is summarizing what was discussed in the third chapter. I don't know if you remember, third chapter, verse 35. Let me just read that verse to you. It is far better to discharge one's prescribed duties, even though faultily, than another's duties perfectly. Distraction in the course of performing one's own duty is better than engaging in another's duties, for to follow another's path is dangerous. You know, Arjuna was talking of doing that. He wanted to give up being a Kshatriya, give up fighting, and live more or less something like a Brahmin, really. But the thing is, you know what the problem is? The problem is this, that you may momentarily, temporarily be able to do some other type of service which is not, your regular service, not what you normally do. You may be able to do it temporarily sometime, but in terms of karma kandya, karma yoga, because it's not really your nature, you won't be able to do it for long. In terms of what is our prescribed duty given by guru, given by the senior devotees, there is special mercy there. Krishna recognizes the instructions given by the guru, and Krishna accepts them, that this is now your duty to do as your guru has said, or even as given just by the senior devotees. So if you try and do something which you're not authorized to do, you'll lose that mercy. So it's like that. So let's conclude verse 48. We're slightly late, but it's all right. Every endeavor is covered by some fault, just as fire is covered by smoke. Therefore one should not give up the work born of his nature, O son of Kunti, even if such work is full of fault. And Prabhupada does give a pretty extensive purport here. Fairly extensive. He gives examples of something which in the prescribed duty, for example, of a Vaishya, it may be by certain moral standards, it's a fault. But when it's done properly in terms of prescribed duty, it's not. For a Vaishya, for example, cheating people in business, Prabhupada says, telling the customer, for you I make no profit. It's a lie. Lies are sinful. But when you do that in your prescribed duty, that you shouldn't be put off doing your prescribed duty because of that. Yeah, you should continue. Because in this world, no matter what you try to do, sometimes there's going to be some fault. Sometimes. Yeah, because it's the material world. Prabhupada gives the example of Vaishyas dealing on the black market, of Brahmins doing animal sacrifice. I mean, not that we do, but, in a Varnashram Karmakandya situation. Yeah, one should carry on. If it's your prescribed duty, carry on even though there are some faults and problems. You can always refer back to the senior devotees, refer back to the spiritual master, how to deal with those challenges. But don't think that I should do something which appears to be easier, because then you contradict this very vital principle of prescribed duty, sacred principle. Okay. So Prabhupada concludes the purport. Let me just finish. When a particular type of occupation is performed for the satisfaction of the Supreme Lord, all the defects in that particular occupation are purified. When the results of work are purified, when connected with devotional service, one becomes perfect in seeing the self within, and that is self-realization. One becomes fully Krishna conscious. Hare Krishna. Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai.